Thanks, Hayden. Yeah, wow, how cool is Maestro? Certainly something that I'm very excited about, but speaking of which, we are the last session, but we've got a very exciting session to come. So as a quick introduction to myself, my name is Alex. I lead the commercial business across Australia and New Zealand, and I'm joined by one of our technical gurus, Junaidi, who's going to run you through some of the demos of the platform that we're about to walk through. So, introducing Test Cloud by UiPath, the next era of agentic testing. Our mission is very simple, but it's very powerful. We want to enable testers to maximize their potential every day, every week, every month, and every release. Our ultimate goal is how do we help you to make testing so efficient that it can become your differentiator as an organization. But let's jump into the platform to see really what this is about. Test Cloud by UiPath brings together performance testing and functional testing into one platform. Now, what makes this really exciting from my side is that we embed AI into every stage of the testing lifecycle. So this is everything from test design, to test automation, to test execution, and reporting as well. So if we look just at the test design side of things, we help you to more quickly and more effectively design your test cases. You can do things like leverage change impact analysis to understand what are the changes and how do you really focus your efforts to maximize results. You can also leverage test gap analysis for things like data-driven and risk-based testing. When we get into the automation side, one of the things that I've seen in the past 15 years is that every organization has a mix of skill sets. Some of the team is technical, some of the team is non-technical, some people are in between. So what we do is we enable the platform to meet you where you are. So we can help the pro coders, we can help the low coders. You can leverage the platform regardless of where you are from a technical standpoint. Now what's interesting is there are a lot of applications out there which just do web testing. One of the beauties of Test Cloud is that we don't just do web, we can do all types of SaaS-based applications, we can do web, we can do mobile, we can do API testing. If you've got that legacy application that no one's been able to automate for the past 10 years, which I know I've had a few conversations with people here that they've got some of those in, we can also support with that. When we get into test execution, we know that the software development world is moving at an ever-increasing pace. So what we do is we integrate with all of the major CI/CD integration platforms, which would already be in your organizations. But one of the biggest challenges I've seen in automation is it's not just about creating your assets, it's about how do you actually maintain these so that they don't become a burden on your team. And I'm sure there's many people here who have built 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 test cases, and you end up spending your time maintaining these things instead of providing value back to the business. So what we do is we have self-healing capabilities that can help you to automatically adapt to the changes in either the underlying technology or the business processes as they change. Finally, one of the cherries on top is that we have a rich set of test management capabilities. So we integrate into more than 50 different ALM tools, whether it's Jira, if you use SAP Solution Manager, we integrate into there, but we also have very, very strong reporting and analytics. So I just wanted to bring it back to the coverage, because I mentioned that we cover more than 190 different technologies. But one of the questions is, what are some of the primary use cases that a lot of organizations see major testing requirements where this can make a material impact to their business? SAP. I know a lot of people will have seen that you need to migrate to S/4HANA by a certain date, which seems to keep changing every time they make an announcement. But those are major initiatives, and testing is a really critical part of that. If testing takes too long, timelines are delayed, and ultimately it's going to take longer to get the functionality into the hands of your users by the time you want to. Salesforce, multiple releases per year. A lot of customers are also replatforming from on-prem into AWS or Azure or GCP. All of these programs of work have major testing requirements, but we don't want testing to be the bottleneck. We want the business saying, the testers have done a fantastic job, how do we get more of this? So the question really is, how does this relate back to the agentic side? And I know that Firan mentioned in the keynote this morning that the future is both agentic, both robotic and agentic. Now on the left-hand side, you can see the left brain approach. This is everything that is predictable, it's repeatable, It's all the stuff that Fiona was mentioning in the first session. This is the stuff we've been doing for years. So this is not the new stuff. We can do this. We can cover all of the different technologies. But really, it's the right-hand side that I'd like to draw your attention to. This is where testing is going. And this is the agentic side. This is non-linear. This is complex. These are things that you essentially cannot code. So what does that really mean? What we've been doing at UiPath is we've been building agents into the testing platform. So there is a number of agents that we already have. This is an ever-growing collection that grows every week with a whole range of capabilities, some of which we're actually going to show to you very shortly. But the one thing that we also know is that there is not one size fits all. Every organization is different. Maybe you want to bring your own LLM. Maybe it needs to be context aware to things that are in your environment that we couldn't possibly know about. So what you can do is you can actually extend and build your own custom AI agents on top of Test Cloud that's going to be able to support you for those specific use cases. So if we're to take a look at what would a typical flow look like, these are just some of the agents that you can see on the screen. But we've got test design, test automation, and test management. From a test design standpoint, let's imagine that you get requirements that come in from the business. Sometimes those requirements are well-defined, but I'm sure some people have received requirements that are not well-defined. What we can do is we can use an agent to do quality checks. And those quality checks can automatically review and automatically enhance those requirements so that the testers have a better understanding of exactly what are they looking to achieve here. Now, one of the ones that I got very excited about when I joined was you can also generate the tests. So if we have really well-defined requirements, we can then automatically generate your test cases for you. Now, this is from a manual perspective in the test design function. But what gets really interesting is as we move into the test automation side, we can then also support to generate both low-code or pro-coded automation scripts at the click of a button. I don't know if anyone's been in testing, but that's not been something that was available a few years ago, and that's something that I'm personally very excited about. And finally, if we apply AI into the test management side of things, we also want to know the trends. What's working, what's not working? Are there any trends that we're seeing that's going to make us more efficient at what we're doing? But that's enough for me. Let's dive into the product. So, hands over to Janeti.
Thank you, Alex. So as Alex said, I will be showing a couple of different functionality of our Autopilot agents. But before I do that, hands up, stretch a little bit, hands up if you've heard of Autopilot. Every one of you have heard of Autopilot before this session, in the previous session by Yannick and Selena. Keep your hands up if you have used Autopilot. Okay, that's great. Now, I hope by the end of the day, most of you who have access to Autopilot will start using it because while we know AI is not going to replace developers or testers, developers and testers who use AI will, right? With that said, I'll show you a few different demonstrations of Autopilot in action. The first one is around looking at generating tests from requirements. So here we've got a user requirements or user story, and what we want to do is, hey, based on these requirements, regardless of it's good or bad, give me some suggestions, right? So we invoke our Autopilot agents, and we give it additional documentations as context. Hey, think about these documentations, think of these manual instructions, and use a prompt as simple as give me some suggestion or complex prompts. And within a minute, or if your document is hundreds of pages long, a couple of minutes, it will give you a couple of recommendations based on your prompts and user stories. And as a tester, what I'll do is I'll review one or more of them. It will be able to create not just a test description, but also the manual test steps. I pick a few that resonates with me. I then add it to my user story or requirements, and I can drill down into the actual user story itself to look at the manual details, the test steps details. Now, from here, we immediately have ways for a manual tester to start executing those steps if needed. Another look at test requirements is SAP. So from an SAP transactions, we can integrate into your SAP environment to paint that picture around what are the most important transactions and where are the gaps. In this demonstration, one of the gaps is changing sales order, right? VA0102 for a SAP transaction. And because UiPath understands SAP and what change sales order means, we can, again, provide description, provide some prompt, and behind the scene, Autopilot will be able to investigate what's happening with your SAP environment and start suggesting what are the typical sales order process that you need to be thinking about or creating from a test case perspective, because that is one of the gaps that we haven't created any test cases for. So once it's complete, similarly, as a tester, you can review them, you can expand upon them. It'll be your typical go to this transaction, enter your sales organization, and things like that. And once you've got test cases built, what you'll have eventually is a heat map like this and say, here's the most important transaction. I've got transaction and test cases that pass or fail, but also here's where the gaps are. So you're not just blindly testing your SAP environment. Taking it to this next step further, we're looking at UiPath Studio, where this is a development environment where you turn your manual test case into an automated test case. So an example here, we're just prompting it to say, hey, we can integrate with the test manager to bring those manual test steps, but I'm just prompting it with some instruction. Give me or generate me a workflow that says, open a website, click on a couple of different screens, and importantly, what you see on the right-hand side here is a list of objects which will grow as your automation library grows, where we understand what is a web page, what is the number of different screens, whether there's a website or your desktop application, and it's going to use the combinations of the prompt and the objects to say, hey, I think what you need is this workflow, right? So really, it speeds up development from a tester or developer's perspective. I don't have to record and click through manually to record it. I can use Autopilot to help me with building a workflow. And all I do as a tester is review them, maybe build some exception handling, and so on and so forth. And by the way, this functionality also applies outside of testing. So if you're an automation developer in process automation, Autopilot is also available in Studio, right, for non-testing functionality. Lastly, with test management, fast forward 6, 12 months, you've got test cases automated, you've got thousands, hundreds, or thousands of test cases. As you can see here, every day I've got 120 odd different test cases running with all the pass-fail rates. It's going to be almost impossible for me to sit there and analyze, what are the common patterns, right? So what we can do is here, leverage Autopilot again to tell me, hey, what are the interesting insights within the last 30 days within my test execution results. So give it a couple of minutes to digest all the logs. And what it's going to be able to tell you is, again, some high-level trends, patterns, but also common errors where potentially your test cases might be failing closer to a release cycle when manual testers are clogging to the system, for example, right? Or some applications are slower in terms of performance. But again, if you're looking at individual test case, it's almost impossible to find these patterns. Let's use AI to do that. But also importantly, on the bottom, there's also recommendation on what to do, whether there's data issue, whether your test case needs to be fixed, and so on and so forth. So that's a few quick demonstrations of functionality out of all the Autopilot agent that can help us as a tester or developer. I would talk about, for example, some of the things that you can do from a test design perspective. We didn't show quality check requirements, but some of the things in the middle here, as I mentioned earlier, also applies to automation developer. Like, hey, please refactor my code, right? Please generate or fix some validation errors. I do that all the time. You saw how Autopilot was used to fix or improve the agent earlier within UiPath. So it's not just limited to test automation, the functionality of Autopilot. This is just some of the functionality that we are showing today.
Cool. Thanks, Junaidi. And I actually had quite an interesting question that I was thinking about over the last few days. And I know that today we've been talking a lot about Maestro. There's been a lot of sessions around the capabilities, the ability to orchestrate different agents and things like that. But we've just talked about testing. And when we go into a lot of companies, there's two different components to it. One side of it is for a lot of net new testing programs of work, the question is, how do you do that effectively? But the other side of this is that there are some organizations out there that maybe they've already got significant investments in something, in certain application testing, in certain parts of their business. Is there anything that we can do to tie Maestro and the test automation capability together?
Great question and very interesting thought. And as a matter of fact, a couple of weeks ago, we had a request from a large enterprise saying they've got north of 15 to 20 different testing tools, open source, paid, and otherwise, right? And the question is, or the request is, can you actually help us orchestrate the testing tools, like UiPath being vendor agnostic, and make them talk to each other? Can we, using Maestro? And prior to Maestro, we don't have a really good answer, but let me show you our final demonstration today with Maestro, leveraging Maestro to orchestrate different testing tools, right? So here you can see just a little snippet of a process that starts with creating a synthetic test data or retrieving the test data from a database, and it triggers a Selenium script. And as you can see here, a little virtual machine somewhere that runs Selenium scripts. It was orchestrated using Maestro, right? And behind the scene, we're just wrapping around this functionality with UiPath test robots and says, okay, please keep running until the test case is finished. And once it's finished, we can look into the output, whether that's a JSON file, and bring that in and create a test data for the subsequent process to use or subsequent tools. In this case, background service with API validation to say someone's applied for a loan on a bank website, does it appear in the backend system? And another test case here that's integrated could be someone's updated or submitted a new documentation of change of address or bank statement. We want to test that a mainframe update test case can be performed in the background using the previous few steps test data. So we're now integrating into a UiPath test case, automating a mainframe in this case, again, under the same umbrella, using the same test data. Finally, we know that a Salesforce opportunity or lead will be created when someone's applied for a loan. Let's make sure that that's created correctly with the right amount, with the right stage, so that a loan officer from the bank can follow up with the customer. That's a very quick demonstration. The whole sort of test cycle, as you can see, finished in about under 3 minutes. If we tweak into the results of those automation, we're looking at test manager and test execution results. Then very quickly, we're just going into Selenium, looking at all the assertions. It could be as simple as, hey, taking a screenshot output. What is the assertion from the command prompt? The Postman API sort of assertions with 200K and whatever that you're testing. Mainframe record as well. And then finally, Salesforce. So every single tools that we are automating from a testing perspective, we're bringing it under the same umbrella using Maestro, right? Prior to this, it's going to be very, very difficult to look at streamlining the tool. But with Maestro, and especially if I zoom out of what you just saw with a very, very simple orchestration, is that we can build in additional complex or more complex requirements very easily in Maestro, such as, hey, is there a way or requirements to build a custom reports, right, that is required above and beyond what UiPath provide? Is there an external API or data warehouse tools that you want these results to be published in? Can we integrate into a messaging system to tell someone if a test pass or fail, right? We can very, very easily do that within Maestro. But if I draw your attention to things that haven't been orchestrated, the bottom right corner here, is if we can tell when tests have failed that's related to an environment, for example, and usually testers just go, hey, I don't know, maybe a Salesforce was down during that execution. I'll just rerun everything. We can really build in some sort of logic to say, if we know it's environment related, let's restart our environment, let's retry the test. And Maestro, because it remembers which test pass fails, it doesn't have to rerun every single step, right? It can say test 1 to 5 has completed, it's passed. So when we reset and retry, start from test number 6. So we have that sort of functionality within Maestro that we can enable. But also importantly, talk about AI agents a lot. So one of the concepts here is potentially looking at giving an AI agents, whether that's a UiPath first-party agent that you build in AI agent builder, UiPath agent builder, or a third-party agent that you build in LangChain coded agents, for example. What if we can give the agent some tools, which is access to the failed test results from test manager, right? Whether that's assertion, screenshots, and also access to the code. So if you talk about Selenium as an example, what is the source code of Selenium script, for example? What is the test failures? Can this agent tell us what's wrong, suggest some improvements, and present that in that human-in-the-loop interface that the guys were showing earlier around, here's a test that's failed, here's what I think you need to change, do you want to make the change, right? Review it, make some additional tweaks if needed, and a human tester or developer looks at it and say, yep, feel free to go ahead. And the agent continuously says, I'm going to check out a local copy of it, local branch, make a local branch, make those changes, rerun the tests, and if it passes, I can commit the change. Now that's a real innovation.
Perfect.
Excellent.
And just for the final slide, this is proven technology. So we have many, many customers. I think there's more than 3,000 customers leveraging our testing platform globally. Anyone from the UK will recognize NatWest as one of the major banks over there. They reduced their test case maintenance by 75%. NTT Docomo, 88% reduction in testing. And there's also Cushman & Wakefield, who achieved 95%. Now, for me, although those are the numbers that are represented here, it's not really where my mind is focused. My mind is focused on what is the impact of these savings. So for example, in an organization like NatWest, what is the impact to their business of a P1 in production? Pretty big, I would say. So if you can reduce your maintenance efforts, which means that you can reallocate that time to increasing your risk coverage, the chances of these P1s in production are going to be less. Now, if your competitors had those issues and you don't, well, then you have a competitive advantage. So part one is, how do you reduce the risk? What is the impact of being able to get that time back to focus on better activities? As I say, with testing, same thing. It's not so much about reducing the overall testing time for a specific thing. It's about how do you test more with your existing capacity? How do you reduce that risk? How do you maximize the business, the value to the business? So the way I look at testing, I know historically there have been some companies that do see testing as a little bit of a cost to the organization. The way I see testing is, this is your differentiator. This is how you take market share. This is how you reduce risk. This is how you provide a better service to your customers. And the companies that do the best are the ones that realize that testing can become a differentiator to help you to get to market more quickly. So with that, we'll just move on to the last slide. If anything's been of interest, we have a QR code, so please take a look at it, reach out. We also have some fantastic partners out there who have very, very strong skills in the testing space using Test Cloud. So that's it from us. Thank you very much for today, and we'll hand over to Hayden for the closing remarks.